Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest here in Austin, Texas, and have had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972. Very grateful for that. And invite you, if you have not done so already, please go to our website. It's titled Two-Way Prayer, and watch that video, and it'll teach you how to do a form of prayer and meditation that was done in the early days of AA, stemming from the Oxford group times. Kind of got lost, and my job is to try to help bring that little puppy back. So we're well on our way to doing it, and hope it's proved really helpful for you. I get lots of emails from folks who are just loving it. Opens a whole new realm, new level to their recovery, and that's exactly what it did for me about, I guess, 31 years ago. We are now into episode 4 of a new series we are doing. It's titled Spiritual Evolution, and that is also the name of a book by Dr. George Vaillant. And Vaillant was a research psychiatrist at Harvard University for many years, and he also served as a non-alcoholic trustee for Alcoholics Anonymous. And I put a link to his book in the show notes. I'd really encourage you to get a copy. But I do want to give a word of warning, and that is that you might want to skip the first 3 chapters. Some friends of mine have said, oh, that was kind of rough going. And I said, well, just kind of get what you can from the first 3, but it really starts opening up after that. Do what you can. It's well worth the effort. So let's go ahead and dive in. And remember what Vaillant's doing here. He's trying to define spirituality, and he says it's an amalgam, a blending, a collection of positive emotions that bind or connect us to other human beings and to God. And what the big book says, remember, is there is no cure for alcoholism, but what we have is a daily reprieve based upon our spiritual condition. So what I take that to mean is, are these positive emotions, which is what he's saying spirituality is about, experiencing these positive emotions, moving away from the negative emotions, living there, and connecting, bonding with other people and with God. And that's going to have a very positive effect on our recovery process. He lists the positive emotions that he covers in the book. They are faith, love, hope, joy, forgiveness, compassion, awe, and mystical illumination. And in the last episode, we explored faith, and we saw that it's really better understood as meaning trust. It's not so much belief in a set of doctrines and dogmas, but trust. Trust in a power, trust in a people, trust in a force, trust as a positive emotion, if you will. Certainly enough trust to get us past step 2. What does that boil down to? You know, that there might be a power that could do for me what I can't do for myself. I'm pretty big on keeping step 2 to a minimum of a minute or so. You know, don't go trying to define God and understand God and all that sort of stuff. I sure as hell don't, and I've read a lot and studied a lot, but I have trust that there is a power, and that if and as I connect to that power, I come into an experience of it, a union with it. And that has been my experience over the years. So question for step 2, is there such a power? Could that power do for me what I haven't been able to do for myself? You do that and you're on to 3. Anyway, this episode is on the subject of love. I think it's chapter 5, I guess, in George's book. And as in the last episode, I thought it might be good to pull a few quotes from the big book and the 12 and 12, kind of get us started. There's a wonderful website called 164 and More. Put a link to that in the show notes. You plug in a word there, and if it's in the big book or the 12 and 12, it's probably going to come up in all the references that are contained in it. So I did that with love. And here, just a sampling, he said, it says in there, you know, he stood in the presence of infinite power and love. Another, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. The purpose of step 11 is to improve our conscious contact with God, with His grace, wisdom, and love. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And love is also one of the four absolutes, the four standards that Bill Wilson kind of built the 12 steps around. Bob said that's all they had in the early days, was those four standards, and that he liked them and he kept using them throughout his life. Love and service are our code, that's kind of the bottom line. By the way, going forward with this series, in each of his chapters, Vaillant breaks them down into shorter little subsections. He doesn't number them per se, just puts little squiggly marks on top of them. And what I'm going to try to do here is explore each one. And I think that could be a good way for us to proceed. So number one, the first section in this chapter is talking about what is love. And he too begins with some quotes. And the first quote is from a scientist who has studied mammals all his life and who called love the most wonderful product of 10 million years of evolution. This is no small thing, our ability to experience and give love. The second is from famous psychologist, you probably have heard of him, Erich Fromm, and he said this: without love, humanity could not exist even for a day. And then finally, he quotes a passage from St. Paul, 1 Corinthians 13. He quotes it in part, but I think it's really worth quoting at greater length. It's not that long. It's what's read at just about every wedding service where they're using a scripture. It's the love chapter. And it's also one that was used in the early days of AA. And I'm going to reference that in just a minute. But here's the quote. I'll put this also in the show notes. This is Paul writing. He says, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I've become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers and know all mysteries and all knowledge, and I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but I don't have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my goods to feed the poor and give my body to be burned, but don't have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love doesn't envy. Love is not boastful or proud. Love doesn't behave inappropriately, doesn't seek its own way, is not provoked, takes no account of evil, doesn't insist on having its own way, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it'll be done away with. For now we know only in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is complete has come, then that which is partial will be done away with. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I felt as a child, I thought as a child. Now that I'm grown, I've put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know in whole, even as I have been wholly known. So faith, hope, love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. I'd met an AA old timer many, many years ago who said that before they had the big book, the alcoholics who were in the Oxford group getting sober, they would take this 1 Corinthians 13 and study it. And each week they would choose one of those qualities of love: patience, kindness, not being jealous. And they would practice them. They'd go home for that week, and that would be their focus, to practice them. And then they'd come back and report, how'd you do? How'd you do being patient? How'd you do being kind? You're conscious of that, an awareness of that. watching for the opportunities when I am and when I'm not. Love seems, to be so very important. I wondered why Vaillant chose it as the second quality of spirituality and not the first. And maybe he listed faith or better trust, because I think we have to have trust before love is going to at least come from our part. It may come from the outside into us, but from our part, we have to begin trusting, entering into a relationship with that other. Okay. In his section one, just some points that he begins with. He says mammalian love, the love of mammals. It involves attachment, joining with, bonding with, that is selective. You don't do it with everyone. It's very selective in whom and with whom it does it. It's enduring, and it's often remarkably unselfish. Hang on to that one. He notes that not all mammals exhibit such attachment, but many, many do. And then he gives a case study of a guy by the name of Tom M. And this is from that longitudinal study that Vaillant oversaw for a great many years at Harvard, where they studied Harvard men, and they also did a study of inner city youth, troubled youth who had real problems, studied them their whole life long. So interviewed them at 20 years, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80. As long as they lived, they were part of this study. Unbelievable. And the results. And what he got to see from that was, in terms of evolution, that love has a way of evolving in our lives. And those of you out there who've had some long-term sobriety, I'll bet you look back on your life, and that's what you're going to see, that there's been an evolutionary quality to it, things that were important, things that were dominating you in the beginning, maybe less and less so as time has gone on. So Tom had a really bleak childhood. Both of his parents were cold, withdrawn. He was born very wealthy, but he never got loved by his parents. He said that until he was 6 years old, he ate all of his meals alone in his playroom. When he grew up, he went on to medical school, but soon after that, he made a suicide attempt. And many of the ones who had terrible childhoods, and he was down in the bottom of the barrel with other kids who had lousy childhoods. A number of them attempted suicide. Painful, not having been loved to that extent. He had a pretty shallow marriage and became a doctor, kind of sterile medical practice. And then at age 33, he began to experience a change. He was diagnosed with tuberculosis, and he was hospitalized, he said, for 14 months. And what Tom experienced there was, maybe for the first time in his life, he could be sick and he was being taken care of. He was being nurtured. And he said this was tremendously freeing for him. Quote from his case study: "I was glad to be sick. My poorly met dependency needs had found an acceptable harbor." His need to be loved, his need to depend on others, where it wasn't safe, where he couldn't trust. Now he was in a position where he was able to do that. So my poorly met dependency needs had found an acceptable harbor. What's depression? It's wanting to climb under the covers, make the world go away. I want to go back to the womb. Got a chance to go back to the womb in a sense. I think when we go to a meeting, we have an opportunity to go back to the womb, where we're going to be nurtured, accepted, loved on, and we're going to respond to that. It's what happens, hopefully, when we come into the program. References Eugene O'Neill, Long Day's Journey into Night. I don't know if you guys have seen that play. Eugene O'Neill came from an terrible alcoholic family, and he had a similar experience. He wound up with tuberculosis and wound up in a hospital. And both men, coming from these dysfunctional families, each one found a safe harbor, a safe place. And that became one of the most important things in their lives. When I was back doing inpatient counseling, I worked with a lot of successful people, doctors, attorneys, priests, engineers, CEOs, people who'd been to some of the very best schools in the country. And now here they were, they're in therapy, they're in counseling, and they're in with pretty common people, the rest of the rest of us are there. And something happened to a number of these guys and gals in their 30 or 40 days in treatment that didn't happen to them anywhere else. I mean, those 30, 40 days, you compare it to a 4-year course at Harvard, and they got something more there that they never got out in the world. And what was it? That they could be themselves, that they could be honest, that they could let their defenses down, that they could find out who they were. And no matter what, sharing their secrets, be accepted, be loved by their groups, by their counselors. Uh, uh, Tom said in his report, suffering was respected, not swept under the rug. So much of the world, you put on that face, that front. You want to put up the good image. You can't be yourself. Well, in treatment, in recovery, in 12-step, if we ain't ourselves, we are screwed. That's the journey, is to go inside, to find the self. And oftentimes that's going back to childhood, because that's where the wounds really begin. It's one of the reasons Wilson said, I want the hand of AA always to be there when someone reaches out. Wilson had a god-awful childhood, abandoned by his father, abandoned then again by his mother. His girlfriend dies. I mean, he was depressed, and alcohol, boom, it lit him up, and he had to go pretty far down before he was able to do it, to recover. And this was the impact of Ebby coming to see him. Someone he knew had been as far down as he had been was able to reach his hand out to him, extend his hand, and invite him into the Oxford group. Tom didn't have an easy go of it. He was hospitalized a second time some years later. He had gotten really depressed, and instead of winding up in a physical rehab hospital as he did with the TB, he now wound up in a psych hospital. And he said he came out of there more spiritually connected than ever before in his life. He came out, he got involved in groups, he got involved in church, he got involved in his community, and he began giving it away, as we say. When he got interviewed for that long-term study, he said he viewed the last several years of his life as the happiest he had ever known. And Vaillant studied that, what's going on. And he says in his report, because he experienced the difference that love can make, loving, enduring, selective attachment, he says, allows the severely depressed to heal. Love heals. And in one sense, the more depressed we are, the more appreciative we are of what we're receiving, the more foreign it sometimes feels to us. And it's a very beautiful thing. Vaillant notes, it's not enough to be loved, though. We need to be able to take love in, and we need to be able to give it back. That there is a flow to genuine love. And love needs to flow in both ways. Can't be just one way. It can't be selfish. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our problem. There needs to be a flow. We're stuck in self. Free me from the bondage of self. The bondage of self is a lack of the flow of love into my life and out from my life. In your car, you have little meters that check the thermometer, the oil, you got to check those those registers in your car. How's your love life going? Is it flowing, or is it stopped? And if it's stopped, you got to do something about it. You got to free yourself from the bondage of self, removing the obstacles to love, because it's our inheritance. It's what should be happening to us. And if it's not, it's unnatural. But truth is, we live in a very unnatural society. Trust me. Okay, that's section one. Section two, it goes a little bit deeper into the nature of love and talks about the difference between selfish love and unselfish love. Eros is Greek for a kind of selfish love. It's instinctual, it's lustful, and it's all about self. And it can evoke in us and in others the negative emotions when this is operating, of jealousy and envy. It's possessive. I love you. Where we say, we don't love, we take prisoners, we capture people, it's not real love, it's eros, just so much love out there, and I got to grab my share. But then there's agape, unselfish love, and it's all about the other, and it evokes the positive emotions. It brings those to life in us, because it's giving, it's outwardly directed, it's coming in and it's going out. Vaillant says real love is the amazing realization that another person actually means as much or more to me than myself. And he goes on to say, mothers have understood this for millennia. That's and boy, try this with your God image. Pray to your mother God, if you had a good mother. Most of us did, but some of us didn't. And that's not a safe thing. And that's where the trust comes in. Can your God image be something that helps you evoke a sense of trust in yourself, in the deepest part of yourself? George says, love is about attachment, and it's the part of the brain where attachment occurs, music occurs, is appreciated and realized. Odors, the olfactory senses are there, and spiritual ecstasy is in that part of the brain. And it's also where God is experienced. Then he quotes again from the scripture, God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. That's the scripture. Probably the most beautiful piece of scripture. God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. A lot of us come in very disconnected, and this attachment theory that a lot of addiction therapists believe in it very strongly, that we got attached to our alcohol, to our drugs, to our food, to our sex, whatever the addiction may be, and it doesn't work. And so we need to go back and do some inner work and attach to something that is positive. And that's why I think two-way prayer is so extremely important in quality recovery, emotional recovery. Love is another name for God. Maybe it's even a better name for God. We toss that G word around like we know what we're talking about, and we don't. For me, this is really what the 12th step in recovery is about. Having had a spiritual experience, an awakening, having touched love, having had love touch us, then we've got a message to carry, and then we've got a real story to tell. It's more than not drinking. It's got to be that I've found something that I've been looking for all my life. Then you got a message to carry. And what Wilson says in the big book, this is important, is that he really hasn't discovered anything new. That what he's talking about here are what the great religions of all time have been teaching for thousands and thousands of years. This is George Vaillant. Now, it's the message of Christ. It's the message of the Buddha. It's the universal message. But Vaillant notes that until recently, scientists have been very reluctant to study love. They're fine with depression and resentment and anger management and all that stuff. But where's the love management? Where's the honesty management? These positive emotions don't get the attention that they really need to have and that people are starving for. So that's the spirituality. I mean, I hope you can start catching that. This is what he's defining as spirituality. Living in these positive emotions, having more of these positive emotions happening to you in your life. You're changing. You're becoming more of a loving person, more of an honest person, right? More of a grateful person. This is spirituality. Let's get it out of woo-woo land, and get it down to a lived reality. And I hear stuff, I read stuff, addiction's going crazy in this country. We need more treatment beds. Fentanyl is killing our kids. Alcohol's destroying us. And that's all true. But I think it has to go deeper than that. You can put people in beds and you can fill them with drugs, and that will keep them alive, perhaps. And that's a really good thing. And I think it has to kind of start there. But God, it can't end there. Give them hope. One of the next ones we're going to get to. Give them hope that there is more than not drinking and drugging. Show them that there is something that's better, a better life than what they had. Not just I'm going to be without the stuff. Jung called this a spiritual thirst for God, a thirst that we have for love in our lives. The last part of this first section has to do with love and vulnerability. And I don't think anything probably makes us more vulnerable than love. And here, Vaillant does another short case study of a doctor who was part of his long-term study. And in one of the final visits George had with this doctor, the guy was well into his 70s, and he told Vaillant about the difficulty he had in accepting love from people. That was more difficult for him than in expressing the love he had for others. And his story that he told was basically this. For his 70th birthday, he'd been a very successful and loving physician for 40 years. And his wife wanted to surprise him on his birthday. And she went and contacted a lot of his former patients that she knew well. He'd seen them for years. And she asked them if they would send letters of appreciation for his years of service to them, how he loved them, how he helped them. And when George interviewed him and they came to discussing this part of love flowing back and forth, the doctor sheepishly said, "Well, let me go get you something, George." And he goes to another room and he brings out a golden box. And in that box, he opens it up. And there are the 100 letters that his wife had collected and given to him. And he turns to George and he says, "Look, not one of them is opened." He could not bear to take in the love. This is sensitive stuff. Maybe it's the most sensitive stuff we come across in life. Vaillant said the guy could talk to him freely about his sex life and take notes and have at it, but not about his love life. This is where you're really, really getting intimate. It's in your connection to life and your connection to people. Is there love flowing there? Or is there blockage? That's the hard part. And I like that he put the letters in a golden box. I did a series on Inner Gold by Robert Johnson, and a lot of people responded to it, to the book. It's a great little book. I'll put it in the show notes. But what Johnson is saying in his little book there is that we have gold inside of us, and we can't realize it. We can't appreciate it. You know, we it's easy for us to be down on ourselves, critical of ourselves. But for many of us, it's difficult to love ourselves. And it's even more difficult to have people love us because we're so used to selling ourselves short. And that's what the gold represents. Hey, this is the power of love. This is the love coming in, love going out. And it's what life is about. It's learning how to love, growing in love. One of the reasons the monk Thomas Merton said that he believed in an afterlife was had something to do with the kind of evolution that Vaillant's speaking about here. Merton said, hey, we work so hard to learn how to love and how to be loved. I can't believe that would end. It has to go on because that's the process, that he said it would be wasteful. It goes on and it goes on and it goes on. That's eternity. Love never ends. Okay, I'm going to speed up a little bit now. Next section, Vaillant does a little bit more work on the brain geography, and he says attachment love, bonding love. It lives within that part of the brain where smells, caretaking, and memory all come together. It's the part of the brain wherein they are experienced. They're not taught. And that's where they're stored. That's where they're stored. And they can come back to life. I did some, it's a long story, but I'll try to be quick about it. But the smells evoke tremendous memories. And they have great power. And many of them are stored within us. We remember dogs, they sniff you 1,000 times more powerful their noses are than ours, but boy, they can sniff, and it's embedded in their memories. This one I love, that one not so much. Look out. But anyway, I was on a retreat and did something called holotropic breath work, where they play music, you lay down for about 3 hours, and it's very powerful, evocative music. And when I laid down, closed my eyes, they start playing the music, and very quickly I smell incense pervading the room. And it was like, oh, my trust level is not high. You people tricked me. And I wanted to open my eyes and wake up, but I didn't. I stayed with it. I allowed myself to experience that. And it was as real as I'm sitting here talking into this microphone. Absolutely real, And then for 3 hours, I drifted off and allowed the unconscious to just kind of have at it. This is what Jung did. It's recorded in his Red Book, where he goes inside. And it doesn't have to be as dramatic as that, but I think it's what we're doing in two-way prayer. We're allowing the unconscious to manifest itself, to come forward, and to bring up memories, and to access love that's hopefully still in there, hey? At least enough of it. We'll get into that in a minute, hey? And this is the limbic system that George talks about a lot in his book. And this is where all of this stuff is registered. I take some solace in the line from the Big Book says the great reality is within too, and if we go deeper into ourselves, what we're going to find at the base of that is a different center, not the ego, but the God center, the great reality that's within. And sometimes when we get in touch with this, we have moments of vital spiritual experiences. Wilson had his white light, his hot flash. There are waves that come up from the depth within. And, few of us got loved as we ought to, but hopefully we had enough love in us to survive. And maybe deep within, we have the remembrance of a school teacher or a grandmother. Grandmothers are great, mostly, unless they beat the hell out of you. Not so great. But a caretaker, someone who loved us for who we were and are, who we are. And that's why when you're doing two-way prayer, I mean, this was not Oxford Group, but I've just found it tremendously helpful when you do the writing, when you've asked a question, expressed a need, and God is speaking to you, you put in there a word of endearment. My precious, my beloved, my darling daughter, my beautiful son. Put that term of endearment in. And what does that do? It helps access the love that is inside of us, that is God, and allows that love to speak to us in our minds and then through our writings. It brings it up and it brings it out, and then we put it on paper. And what are we doing in two-way prayer? If you're doing it right, you're speaking to love, and you're experiencing love unconditionally. Unconditional love. Not if you do this, I'll love you, but I'll love you even if you don't do it. I'll love you no matter what. I'll love you in spite of yourself. That's the stuff. In section 4, Vaillant, he takes a look briefly at natural selection. This is Darwin stuff, yeah? And he notes that, on the savannas of Africa, a young gazelle can survive with selfish genes. As soon as it's born, it can walk. In contrast, he says, if not born into an unselfish human community, the Homo sapiens child is destined to become some predator's lunch. We have to protect these little kids, and do so for a long, long time, because it takes human beings a long time to mature, a long time to move out of this selfishness that is natural into a more mature, unselfish, loving state. And that's it takes us time. And if you're an alcoholic or an addict, it takes us a hell of a lot more time than other people. We don't mature in a hurry. He says, humans have survived by sophisticated social bonding, characterized by unconditional attachment, forgiveness, gratitude, and affectionate eye contact. Gaze on the child, and the child gazes back on the mother, and bonding happens. It's so important that you have that time. And thank God we're realizing some of this stuff, and giving people, family leave. Go bond with that kid. Go spend time. Go look in her eyes. Love on her, because that's what she needs. Touch her, because we feel through our skin. They did an experiment. He talks about it where that they used to think the kid just wants mother's milk. Well, they created a monkey that had milk, but no touch. And they had another monkey that was soft and fluffy and furry, and and which one did the little monkey go to? It wasn't the milk. It was the mothering. It was the nurturing. I'm not big on prayers that just spill out and off we go, and quote the 3rd step prayer and the 7th step prayer and the 9th step prayer and all this good stuff. Nothing wrong with that. But I'd rather you just sat there for a minute and got loved on by God. That you sat there for a minute and did some inner work with the love you didn't get from your father or your mother, and allowed that to heal. To me, that's prayer. That's real prayer. And it's using your imagination in prayer. Wilson says in the 12 and 12, it's a good use of the imagination. That's what we got them for. Use them. God knows we use them to think about all sorts of terrible things. Use them for good. Section 5, he says, love, like the sacred and our image of God, has a timeless quality to it. But in contrast, lust marches to a marvelous but much more urgent drummer. All right, it's immediate. I want this and I want it now. I want what I want when I want it. This is lustfulness within ourselves. The object, he says, of a passionate one-night stand may seem boring and ugly the next morning. Lust is delightful, but lust is all about me. Lust is immature. Don't deny you have it. We've got it. All right. But don't settle for it. There's more to life than that. I was in therapy years ago with a fella who was, and we had a really tough counselor back then. This guy had been married 9 times. And the therapist says to him, why don't you marry your mother and get it over with? What's he looking for in marriage? He's not looking for a partner. He's looking for a mother. And no woman is going to be able to give that to a man in the way he needs it. Go pray to God, your mother, and get loved on there. And, when we fall in love, infatuation, it's a kind of a form of insanity. We think we've found, the answer to all of our prayers. That's nice. It's lovely. Infatuation, it's normal. But is it going to stand the test of time? Is she going to come down to earth, or is he going to get off of that white horse? Because he is, sooner or later, it's going to happen. Honeymoons are nice, but love over the long term is different, and that's where the endurance comes in. When the glow is kind of gone, that's when the work begins. Watch out for that. If you're a love addict, if you're a sex addict, not that you're not attracted, don't deny it. Dr. Bob said he still loved alcohol, but he had abused it, and therefore it was not something that he could treat as other people were able to. A couple of good quotes in this section. He quotes a wise editor, Vaillant does, who once told him, George, it's not that divorce is bad. It's that loving people for long periods of time is good. And I would say the same about our participation in recovery. There are lots of hot flash people, falling stars. Stay the course, and something deeper is going to happen to us. Here's an 80-year-old man who was part of that long-term study George did. And he said to him, quote, that he fell in love with his wife in the 11th grade. Got interviewed, later in life. At 65, he observed that his love for his wife was now much deeper than at the beginning. And 12 years after that, confided as his life was coming to an end, I love her even more. And what Vaillant says, and this is true, human attachment takes time. Right? The maturation, the maturing of love in the human being takes time. And when I was in treatment, I was told one thing that I have never forgotten. And that's that if I didn't find something that felt better to me than alcohol or drugs, I'd never really recover. That's what I was searching for. And the thing that feels better than alcohol or drugs, what is it? It's love. Love that grows deeper, love that grows richer, and love that never ends. That's what we've been looking for. Taken me about 51 years, but I think I'm finding it. And I hope you'll find it too. Eh? When you do, I hope you'll ask God, who is love. And the next episode we're going to do is on exactly that subject. It'll be on hope, the place of hope as a positive emotion, as part of spirituality. And I hope you'll come back and share it with me. So I was late getting this thing up. I know that. I apologize for that. I'll try to may get hope done a little quicker. So thank you for listening. God bless, and keep coming back.